Nissan and Pohanka Hyundai. It's hard to be down on your luck when you're Virginia's first choice for new Nissan and Hyundais, but I need to sell 60 cars this week. Right now, I'll pay you big bucks for your good luck. Bring down any good luck charm you've got, and based on the sale price of the car you choose, I'll give you up to $4,777 off any nicer, newer car this week. Today, your lucky penny is worth plenty, up to $4,777 off any nicer, newer car you want. Stop moping and hoping you'll get approved. With my For the People credit approval process, the banks are looking to get lucky and lend to you, even if you've been turned down before. Bring me any good luck charm and I'll give you up to $4,777 off any nicer, newer car today. Hurry, once I get rid of 60 cars, the luck runs out. All offers require bank approval, so call us at 1-800-POHANKA, visit Pohanka Nissan and Pohanka Hyundai on Route 1 in Fredericksburg, or better yet, log on to TimPohankaForThePeople.com. And when we make a deal, I promise it'll be your lucky day. I'm Tim Pohanka, and I'm a leprechaun for the people.
Welcome back, folks, to the Rock Newman Show. We are broadcasting from the Langston Hughes Room at Busboys and Poets, 14th and V Street, Northwest Washington, D.C. And it just, not only does that sound good, the Langston Hughes Room, it feels good up in here. And when I talk about feeling good, to have my next guest sitting next to me, she was just recently referred to as the champion on the Hill. She is a long-term congresswoman from the District of Columbia who has really been leading a charge, oftentimes fighting an uphill battle, but fighting that battle in a fierce kind of way. Fighting that battle, never, ever yielding an inch. I just have such tremendous respect for the person and for the job that has been done for many, many years. We know there's a lot more work that needs to be done. Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton, welcome to the Rock Newman Show.
Oh, Rock. Rock, always generous, Rock. Thank you for those terrific words. And I must say, what an honor for me to be on your premiere show here in historic Shaw.
That's right.
In the middle of where it's happening.
That's right. Just
you know where to have them.
just up the street from U Street. Yes. Where so much has happened here.
Yes.
In this particular corridor. Elenor, where do we start? So many places from which to choose. Let's start here. The nation's capital, the seat of government, the centerpiece of this grand experiment called democracy. Democracy, which means we all play a role, we all have a say, loosely defined. The residents in Washington, D.C. do not have a vote in Congress. It was said many moons ago, taxation without representation is tyranny. It was said then, and I would submit that taxation today without representation, true representation, is still tyranny. What are we going to do about that?
Rock, it's still tyranny, and it makes it so that for many residents, this is not the seat of government, but the seat of oppression. Because much of what was wrong with our country, we have methodically, slowly corrected. We have not corrected this central flaw. Now, we've gone some distance. You remember when we didn't even have home rule.
Absolutely.
It was not until 1974 that we had a local government. When I grew up in this town, there were 3 commissioners. It was a segregated town. And let me say, so everybody understands where it all comes from. The same Congress that has denied us our voting representation is the same Congress that segregated the District of Columbia. The District of Columbia was one of the Brown versus Board of Education cases.
Right.
It tells you everything about this town. It was controlled by Southern Democrats, and D.C. had to free itself, and the only way we're going to get free now is to free ourselves. And the kinds of things we're doing. Now, Rock, I have to say to my to your audience, you're absolutely right. We don't have the vote on the House floor. We have no Senate vote.
Yeah.
I do have votes in committees. That is very important to the district because Muriel Bowser just talked about the $5,000 home buyer credit. I was able to get that out of committee.
Right.
Certain kinds of things you can get out of committee. But this is what you can't get out of committee. What you can't get out of committee is anything to replace the journeys you have made to Arlington Cemetery for young men, as it turns out, who've died in the Afghanistan war
Yes.
and in the Iraq war for the
Yes.
vote
Yes.
for other people
Yes.
without getting a vote for themselves.
Yes.
What you can't make up for out of committee is the highest one of the highest federal tax rates. And that's what we have in the District of Columbia with no representation. And that's the quid pro quo. If you want our money, let us have a vote on how much you spend, what it should be spent on. Right. But you can't take our money and we get nothing in return, and that's where we are now.
And if I can piggyback on that, what I would call the vulgar absurdity of our young men and women from the District of Columbia going to foreign lands, giving their lives, coming back home in caskets, and their mamas and daddies and their brothers and sisters can't vote and have a say in the policies that cause them to go there and die. Now, we go around the world. We go around the world as the big bad policeman, trying to institute democracy, and we're not practicing democracy here. If this sounds like a sore subject with me, and maybe as a talk show host, I perhaps should be just maybe more balanced, but it offends my sense of decency. It offends any right person's sense of decency. Would you talk to us about the struggles that you have and that the district has had in dealing with Congress, trying to get some change where there can be statehood or some greater autonomy? And I'm going to let you answer that question. And then, I mean, right on the tip of my tongue and at the top of my head is this... I'll be kind and say this gentleman, Darrell Issa, who has been given a lot of blues to the District of Columbia. But can you talk to us about some of your battles with trying to make a change and trying to strive towards statehood?
And statehood is the only way to get our full rights. But in getting there, Rock, it has been amazing to have to struggle for what you would think would come to us just by the way, because of those caskets you just spoke of.
That's right.
Now, we just finished having a big fight. We wanted, but why would we have had to fight for it? We learned from a mother who wrote me to say she had gone to the graduation of her son from boot camp, Navy boot camp. This was a son.
D.C. resident,
who had gotten into college, but he said to his mother and father, I have got to go into the Navy. They said, we supported him. We went out there. And he said, Mrs. Norton, when each graduate's name was called, they raised the flag of the state. And when my son's name was called, no flag was raised. Well, that was about the last straw for me, Rock, because I serve with members who act like the members of the armed service can get anything they want. They do obeisance to them. Well, we had to fight for it. And thank goodness for this mother, also for the veterans who came forward to tell stories I did not know of, which is why people have to speak up. Some of them told stories of coming home from as far back as Kuwait. And when those units are mixed, and the flag is carried, but their flag was not. We had to get a bill through the Congress that said, when you raise the flags of the 50 states, raise the flag of the District of Columbia. Now, why do I have to fight for that?
Something so basic.
We just had a 12-year fight. And by the way, these symbols, when I first thought about these symbols, I didn't give them the weight that residents give them and that it turns out they deserve. And something that happened this week that Councilmember Bowser also mentioned is an example of how one of these symbols can bring us substantive return. And there was a great brouhaha because for about a dozen years I fought to get a statue of Frederick Douglass in the Capitol. Frederick Douglass was chosen by the residents of the Capitol. And by the way, they chose Frederick Douglass not for only the reasons most Americans think about. This is the great abolitionist, the women's suffrage man, the great universal human rights man. This was a D.C. man. He didn't just build his house out there in Anacostia and go about his national and international business the way so many people. Remember, we have many very famous people who live here.
Right.
The man was deeply involved in D.C. political life and in D.C. civic life. Served as a trustee of Howard University, and went to political meetings insisting on an independent local government and on voting rights. And here we had a big ceremony because whenever a statue comes into the Capitol, is given by a city, the entire Democratic and Republican leadership is there. And here we have the two Republican leaders who have opposed statehood and opposed voting rights and opposed everything we stood for. Then we had Nancy Pelosi, Vice President Biden, because the president was in Europe, had the G8. Everyone spoke of the great Frederick Douglass. And so I told the truth. I said the residents of the District of Columbia revere Frederick Douglass for what he did for humanity. But we revere him especially for what he did for this city. And then I said, I'm known for my sharp views on equality for the district, but I said, I must defer to Frederick Douglass because some of the sharpest views I've ever heard. He said, his speech, I quoted from his speech and said, he said, these residents are outside of the country. Yeah. They are not accorded, they are treated as aliens. I said, the reason that district residents voted for Frederick Douglass is because he voted for us. He was with us, and we so appreciated it. Now, the leader of the Senate, that's Harry Reid, never goes on a bill. I've had a statehood bill. We've asked all the Democrats to go on it. Well, I hadn't taken umbrage with that because the leader goes on almost no bills. Mm-hmm. He goes on his bills, maybe a few others. He used the occasion to get before that audience and with the Democratic and Republican leaders behind him to say, I am strongly for statehood. I'm going to become a sponsor of the statehood bill. That is itself almost historic. If they would go on it, they wouldn't exactly shout it from the hilltop because kind of everybody would want them to go on bills and they go on so few. It was stunning. Everybody in this great big Emancipation Hall clapped, except the Republican leaders.
Yes.
So think about this symbol. This symbol had an effect. Now we have all of the Democratic leadership in the Senate, and the Senate is the hard one because most of the time it's been hard to get. Senate usually is a club.
Yeah.
Two senators dilutes, and that's what we want, would dilute their leverage. Now we've got the second in command, that's Dick Durbin. We've got Patty, we all the leaders. I won't name them all. We got all the leaders on the bill. And Frederick Douglass inspired that because he personifies our struggle. And you've got to have these symbols to personify your struggle. And when they leave you off of anything, even though it may seem small, insisting that you be on it is insisting that your American citizenship be acknowledged.
That's right.
And never be and never be deprecated. So I don't want to sit here, Rock, and tell you statehood is around the corner.
Mm-hmm.
I am going to say that nobody ever got anything without a struggle. I can say this as
Somebody named Frederick Douglass said.
did say,
Progress-
agitate, agitate, agitate,
Progress comes not without a struggle, never has, and never will.
and never will.
Never will. We're already at the point where we have to take our first break. Fortunately, you're going to be able to stay here with us a little bit longer, so we'll come back in just a few moments with Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton, representative of the District of Columbia. Hello to all my friends in the DMV. I am Rock Newman from the Rock Newman Show. I want to tell you about the MGM Grand National Harbor, the most exciting project to come to the District, Maryland, or Virginia in quite some time. You're going to have great fun. Come on down, support this project with all you have. It is going to be wonderful for the area. We're going to increase our tax base. We're going to get funding for the police department, for ambulance, for fire, for education. It is really a project that is going to benefit our area. Folks, we want to support in a very strong DMV kind of way this great project from the MGM Grand National Harbor. Folks, welcome back to this segment of the Rock Newman Show from Busboys and Poets. What a fabulous place, Busboys and Poets. We are in the Langston Hughes room. I'm in the Langston Hughes room at Busboys and Poets with Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton. Elenor, we just had, you just shared with us the lack of democracy that is being practiced, really being practiced and perpetrated upon the citizens of the District of Columbia who pay taxes, who go to fight in wars. So, you know, those sort of tragedies, if you will, are well documented. Can you share with us, just for a moment, what it was in the structure of the Constitution that created this and continues to allow this lack of democracy to be practiced here in the district?
Rock, it was never meant to be. And if you revere the founders at all, remember, think first of why they went to war. And going to war was an act of treason against Great Britain. They went to war, as you have said earlier, because of taxation without representation, not abstract notions of freedom, but taxation without. Now, it is inconceivable, and we have the documentation to prove it, that these same founders that went to war to make sure everybody had the vote would have said, but not for the residents of the nation's capital. As it turns out, they didn't want the capital to be part of a state, and they had to create something that didn't exist anywhere else, a capital that wasn't in a state and was kind of hanging out there by itself. It had to be the nation's capital. So this is what they did. They put the nation's capital under Congress. But how did they get the land? They got the land from Maryland and Virginia who had voting citizens living here.
Right.
Now, you bet your bottom dollar that those who signed the Constitution, and Maryland and Virginia each had two who signed the Constitution. We're not about to give the land without some promise that their residents wouldn't be disenfranchised because of this new thing that didn't exist in history, that wasn't a part of a state. So this is what they did. And this is one of the greatest broken promises. They didn't just take a promise. These residents, during the 10-year transition period between Maryland and Virginia, they said, we'll fix you. Give us the land. These people will vote just the way they vote now.
Yes.
So during that 10-year period, the people from Maryland and Virginia voted in Maryland and Virginia just like everybody else. Once it came under the jurisdiction of the United States, it fell to the Congress to say, your vote now will be provided by us. Residents of the District of Columbia went into the street to say, you promised, and we know you promised because, in fact, you let us vote for the time of the transition period. Now keep your promise now that, and they never did. So it was a fatal flaw and a broken promise, but it was not born with the Constitution. It was born of that first Congress who proceeded not to allow us to have our vote for all these years. It should be said. In my talk yesterday, I stressed that Frederick Douglass was a Republican. And if I may say so, any self-respecting Negro had to be a Republican then. After all, it was the Republicans who stood for the freedom of the slaves. And by the black people.
Not exactly the Republicans
that we know today.
Right.
But with all these Republicans who do just the opposite today, I indicated that this man was a Republican. That's what he stood for. Those Republicans, during Reconstruction, after the Civil War, gave D.C. a delegate, gave D.C. home rule. And let it be said, who took it away? Democrats.
Right.
When the Democrats, after Reconstruction, took over the district, they abolished the delegate. That's what I'm called. They abolished home rule, and when we were for almost 100 years, 150 years almost, without any home rule. When I say Douglass didn't mince any words, in one speech he said, the Congress has deprived all the white people here of the right to vote just to keep the colored people from voting. Right. He said it, and that's what it was all about.
Very factual, very real. How are you going to argue with that?
And that's the great Douglass speaking. And so you see this has been and the Republicans have the nerve to say, well, we can't do anything about it because the Constitution says that it comes under the Congress, and therefore you've got to go get a constitutional amendment. To his credit, there was a Republican, Tom Davis. He later retired from Virginia. Yeah. He sponsored with me and he was in charge then. Rock, it should be said, for almost all that I have been able to do for the District of Columbia, God knows it's not what I wanted to do, but has been done when I've been in the minority. We have not had control of the House for most of my more than 20 years in the Congress. Right. Therefore, it was very important to have this Republican come forward from Virginia. And we actually got it through the House and Senate, and then the National Rifle, that's a House-only vote. It would have been a stepping stone that we would have built on toward statehood. But the National Rifle Association stuck in an amendment that would have not changed laws here and there, wiped out all the gun safety laws in the District of Columbia. And this was one of the great tragedies, so that we had to leave the vote on the table or exchange the vote for our public safety.
Right. Barack Hussein Obama. Talk to me about your feelings of how much he has been a supporter for where you're trying to go with statehood, and how much more we need him to do.
Well, it is certainly true that when we got our first African-American president, everybody dreaming of statehood and everything else. The president in his first term disappointed D.C. residents, not because he didn't deliver. He couldn't have delivered. He can't do that by himself. The Congress had to do it, but because he wasn't as forthright, frankly.
Forthright and or as forceful.
That's what I mean, and speaking out for our rights. There came an occasion when residents, as much as they love Barack Obama, let him know. And that was as the I guess the second term began, and the Republicans had really put him up against a wall. It was, that's what they've been doing. There was an omnibus, all of the appropriations tucked into one bill, and they had somehow managed to get most of the extraneous amendments out. But there was one amendment left and that amendment would have deprived low-income women, deprived the district of being able to spend its own local funds on abortion services for low-income women. Now, around the United States, hundreds of jurisdictions, because you can't spend federal money, spend their own money. The president gave us up. Well, as a result, you had something that I haven't seen here. Now, I've engaged in civil disobedience in the South. I've never seen district residents engage in civil disobedience, but from Mayor Vincent Gray on down, they sat in the streets, and after they had done that, a few weeks later, they went and sat out in front of the White House. I must tell you, we have seen excellent responses ever since. The president has put in his budget, for example, budget autonomy. That's really what we're trying to get now. We know we can't get statehood now, but there's no reason why we shouldn't have control over our own money.
Correct.
$6 billion we raised.
Right.
Why should I go to the master and say, can I spend my money, the master in the Congress?
You know, and the Congresswoman is not saying that facetiously. These are revenues from this generated here in this district government that you're going to the master that doesn't pay anything for the buildings that they occupy.
And didn't raise a cent of that money.
And didn't raise not one penny. Let's switch gears for a second. I've been watching something with just abject fascination. It is this matter in the committee that Darrell Issa recently is heading up, where he's the most investigating congressperson I've ever seen. And I'm telling you something, you know, there seems to be some McCarthy DNA. You know, I'm going to say it if somebody else doesn't want to say it. But just recently, with the matter with the IRS, quote unquote scandal. You know, the news media has really been nauseating me about referring to certain things as scandal when the facts aren't there. So Issa goes out, and I'm going to, you know, paraphrase here, but clearly says that the president's spokesperson is a paid liar and goes on and on about the direct connection between the White House and the quote-unquote IRS scandal, that he has lock, stock, and barrel evidence, footage, paperwork, and everything else. Well, the Democratic congressman, the minority-ranking member,
Cummings, Representative
Elijah Cummings, says, well, wait a minute, show it. Well, let's release it. You're making these bold claims. Let's release these documents. Unless it happened this morning, while I was driving, didn't know anything about it, those documents haven't been released, except Elijah Cummings clearly indicates and has demonstrated he has proof that there was not the connection that Issa was talking about. Talk to us about that brand of vitriolic, you know, gotcha politics that's being played in our nation's capital today.
It's interesting, and I'm going to tell you about Darrell Issa and the district, and Darrell Issa and his national work that you have seen.
Mm-hmm.
Darrell Issa's work on the IRS is exactly as you describe it. We now have people at the lower level. We have their transcripts because we have to take depositions before hearings in which they said, look, some say we don't know where it came from. Others said it certainly didn't come from Washington. We were trying to figure it out. And let me just say for your audience, let me tell you why they were trying to figure it out. These people want, this is 501c4. The statute says you have to do charitable work exclusively. IRS has interpreted that to mean in its regulations primarily.
Yeah.
They have caused confusion.
Huge difference.
Yeah, huge difference.
Yeah.
They have. I don't think exclusively means exclusively.
Yeah.
So I don't think any of these people should be getting a tax exemption.
Right.
But since they're saying primarily this is their job, they have to sit down and see, well, how much of your work is political? You'd have to ask that question.
Right.
How much of your work is charitable?
Right.
That doesn't come out in these hearings, you know. And I am on the committee, a senior member of the committee, deeply involved in these hearings. What we have been able you're totally right. The IRS has had only two people. There's only two people who are political appointees. We don't even know that they were involved, but they've resigned. The president asked for their resignation.
Right.
Everybody else is a civil servant, like thousands who live in the District of Columbia. Now comes out that as many progressive organizations as what do you call them? Tea Party organizations had this investigation. Well, they had to. You had to see how much of their work was political and how much was not.
Sure.
It is really all about nothing. So Darrell is about tying as much of this to the White House, you use the right word, McCarthyite, by insinuating that somehow it must have come from on high without a scintilla of evidence. Now I got to tell you something about how I have to operate in the Congress. You know me, I'm out there, just as you said, on the IRS, speaking out about, I've used the word McCarthyism in committee. Darrell Issa, for reasons of his own, has worked diligently and amicably with me on D.C. matters. You've got to be very strategic in the Congress.
Which is surprising to a casual or an acute observer.
Has to be.
And you know, there's a question. Why?
Because you learn to work, you know, so much so that Darrell, when there's, I remember once when there was a press conference going on when he wouldn't let women testify, you know, at a hearing on women's health. I said, Darrell, I want to speak with you about something. I spoke with him. He said, Eleanor, I know you. I think you better get out there now because I know it's time for you to go to your press conference. He knew I was going to a press conference against him. Right. But this is an important point, and I think you are providing me with a very important opportunity. How have I been able to get things done in the district of? Do these people think that I will do something for them? I can't do anything. I can't vote. You learn to deal with the members and you find members grown up enough to do this in their work.
That's really an operative word right there, grown up enough, because there's not a lot of, there's just too little of that today. Almost
none of it. But when it comes to the district, he is helping us on budget autonomy. He has a budget autonomy bill. You know what I think is the reason? He wants to get something, the chairmanships from the Republicans last only a few years, unlike our chairmanships. Because this is this committee mostly does investigations. The big things it's got is get a postal service bill, and then he has jurisdiction over the District of Columbia. I think he thinks, you know, at the end of the time, will I have done anything? Well, if all I've done is beat up on the District of Columbia. So when I go to him and try to form a relationship, instead of giving me the crypto, DC, I must not be for it, he sees, well, what's in it for me? Maybe it looks like I have done it. Because if it happens on his watch, it's not me. He's the chairman of the committee. And I've had to work with chairmen like that throughout most of my time in the Congress. And if you can find one, then it'll work. And if you can't, you try to bring him to you in the best way you can. But what you must never do is make him believe that you would relinquish one iota of what you must do or say in behalf of the District of Columbia. And isn't it interesting? None of them thinks that a member would do that. In other words, members know who elect them. You know, cozying up to Darrell Issa is not going to get you elected in the District of Columbia.
Elenor, we are unbelievably out of time. You have been an admirable champion. I just applaud your effort. I applaud all the work that you do, your tenacity, and how you've made every effort to make lives for the citizens of the District of Columbia better. God bless you and keep up the fight. You certainly have support from this corner here.
Coming from one of the most admired men in the District of Columbia, I take that with great humility and so appreciate your graciousness, dear.
Thank you for joining the Rock Newman Show. Folks, we'll be back in just a moment.